G'day gymnastic skill seekers. Today I want to talk about midline stability or core strength and specifically the hollow body shape. So we want to be able to maintain the hollow body shape in movements like push-ups and in movements like handstands. We often see a lot of gymnastic skill seekers struggling to maintain the hollow body shape, and they're worming out of their push-ups or their alignment in the handstand and the straight handstand is off. So we want to think about the position of the pelvis here. Specifically in these movements, we're talking about the posterior pelvic tilt. So one way we can demonstrate this is in a kneeling position. I can put my hands on the hip bones and I can tilt the pelvis forward. This is an anterior pelvic tilt. And then I can also tilt the pelvis backwards. This is a posterior pelvic tilt. Okay? So in a kneeling position, can you tilt the pelvis forward? Can you tilt the pelvis back? So when we create that posterior pelvic tilt, we're tucking our tailbone between our legs and we're contracting the glute muscles. Now, when these muscles here work, these muscles here work. So we think about the anterior pelvic tilt, pushing the hips back and tilting forward like this. These switch off and these lengthen and switch off as well. So this doesn't help our core stability or core tension in positions like the push-up or the handstand. When I go to the posterior pelvic tilt and I contract the glutes, well then these work as well, okay? We start to create more tension through our midline. So we can start to play with the anterior and posterior pelvic tilt in a number of key positions. The first one I like to use is the yoga cat-cow. So we go into a quadrupedal position, shoulders stacked above hands, hips stacked above knees, and we just focus on the pelvis. Can I create a posterior pelvic tilt? Can I tilt the pelvis and move into an anterior pelvic tilt? Posterior pelvic tilt, contracting the glutes, anterior pelvic tilt. So just being able to rotate the pelvis in that position and get an idea of the maximum anterior and posterior pelvic tilt that you can create. In the quadrupedal position, this is pretty easy because there's not much load we're putting through our midline. So to progress this, we can move to the push-up. So in the push-up position, I want to push the feet together. I'm going to push the heels of the feet together here. So heels together. I can go from anterior pelvic tilt to posterior pelvic tilt. Push the heels together. Anterior pelvic tilt, posterior pelvic tilt. Pushing the heels together. So this challenges us more now because the lever length is longer and we need more midline stability in the push-up than we do in the quadrupedal position. We can now change the angle of this and move down lower to a forearm plank, which again will increase the demand on the midline tension. So again, the feet are together. I can move from anterior pelvic tilt to posterior pelvic tilt. Anterior pelvic tilt, posterior pelvic tilt. And I can feel how when the glutes are working, the abdominals are working in this position. When performing movements like push-ups or planks or our hollow body holds or anything that requires us to maintain that hollow body shape, I always tell my clients to push the inside edge of their feet together, to push their heels together. I do this because it helps them create more midline tension. So a little demonstration that we can do to prove this is if I stand with my feet apart and I think about that posterior pelvic tilt, so I'm tucking the pelvis under, so it's not anterior, posterior, and I squeeze my glutes as hard as I can. So squeezing the glutes nice and strong, I feel a good contraction here. But now if I put the feet together and I do the same thing, I set that posterior pelvic tilt, I squeeze my glutes, but I also push the heels of the feet together as hard as I can. I get a much stronger contraction here, okay? Now, when these muscles work, these muscles work. So on that posterior pelvic tilt, when I contract that, then my abdominals work, and that helps me create midline tension. When these switch off, and I generate that anterior pelvic tilt, well then these muscles here switch off as well. So by pushing the heels of the feet together, it allows us to create a stronger glute contraction, which allows us to also create more tension through our abdominals and therefore maintain a much better hollow body shape in movements like push-ups, in movements like handstands, in all the movements that require that hollow body or dish shape in our gymnastic skills. Give that little test a try and see how you go. So these are just some progressions I like to use with my clients to help teach them about the anterior and posterior pelvic tilt, to help teach them about how the glutes engaging will help them engage their abdominals. This helps them build the core strength that they need for push-ups, and it also starts to give them an awareness of what they're going to need to do in a handstand to create that posterior pelvic tilt to get a nice straight handstand. So give it a try, see how you go. If you've got any comments, please leave them below and I'll definitely get back to you. But happy posterior pelvic tilt training.